The steep rise in fuel prices has pushed up transport, vehicle, as well as food costs. And today we're looking at how South Africans are currently coping with these increases. My partner in news, Gareth Edwards, is in Johannesburg this morning, about to continue with these conversations. Right, Gareth, good morning to you again. Partner, quite important to give, our viewers some sort of an idea of how they can even try to maneuver with all these costs associated to food, transport, or even petrol. I just wonder if there is a light at the end of this tunnel.
We've got to wonder if there is light at the end of the tunnel. Here's the problem with living in our country right now. Even if there was light at the end of the tunnel, we'd probably go through blackouts. So we just have a very dark tunnel in the end. But as far as fuel prices are concerned, let's bring in Leighton Beer to talk about this again. Hello to you, Leighton, joining us from Pretoria. This morning, we're going to talk about fuel stations and the fuel price itself in a moment. But just give us the bad news. Do we have a better sense, Leighton, of what the next fuel price increase is going to look like, and what's the fight for the fuel levy reduction look like at the moment? Morning, Leighton.
Oh, good morning, Gareth. Look, I mean, when we look at the unaudited figures from the Central Energy Fund, the picture is looking bleak. We're looking at an increase of around R1.65 for diesel and R1.80 for petrol. And that's, certainly going to push those prices into further record territory. We've seen an increase of around 4.5% already on the prices of fuel since January. A litre of 95 unleaded in January cost you around R19.60. Today it's going to cost you around R24.07. Come next week, when the price is adjusted, as it is on the first Wednesday of every month, that's looking like a significant increase again, like I say, around R1.85 for 95 unleaded fuel. And then on top of that, you've got to remember that the relief that government gave of cutting the fuel levy by R1.50 is going to be reduced further, because that relief is going to be slashed by 75 cents. It's going to be halved. So you've got to take 75 cents of that relief and add it back to the fuel price, which means, in effect, that a R1.80 increase to the basic fuel price is really going to be around R2.50 plus. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on consumers. And certainly, it's something that I think is very worrying, and needs, in our view, some sort of attention by government. And, you ask about how far is the fight in terms of extending the relief. Well, government has indicated they are not going to extend the relief. They say they don't have any money to cover the losses of extending that relief. So for the moment, it's 75 cents on top of the increase that we're expecting to see.
And Leighton, if we've still got the time, I'll come back and talk about where the levy could maybe get reduced later, talk about the road accident fund, but we'll get to that if we've still got enough time later. I'll circle back on that one. Can we just quickly talk about petrol stations for a moment? Just help us understand, because today's show is about helping customers and consumers and drivers make good choices. We're here at the Dome, in case you've just tuned in, anyone else joining us, to try and find out, should you be downgrading your car because of the fuel price? So that's the focus for us, is the fuel price as well. Give me a sense, Leighton, petrol stations, is there a minimum and a maximum that petrol stations can charge? I'm not sure if you heard my example earlier. A petrol station right around the corner from me, my closest petrol station, is charging close to R2.50 more than a different brand petrol station for the same fuel 2 kilometers away from me. What are the rules around petrol stations?
So in your situation, Gareth, you're obviously talking about diesel, and diesel in South Africa is an unregulated fuel, which means that the government will publish a wholesale price that is a recommended wholesale price for that fuel, for diesel. But garage owners, fuel stations, can then sell that fuel at a reduced cost, so they can sell it for less, or they can decide to sell it for more. That is the nature of that deregulated fuel. So you will find, service station A selling it at R2.50 less than service station B. There may be a payoff that service station makes in terms of, more traffic through its shop. It may sell more petrol. It may sell more illuminating paraffin, depending on where it's located. So those are the types of sums that those service station owners are going to make. So in terms of diesel, a service station can sell it for less or for more than what is the wholesale price. In terms of petrol, that is a regulated fuel, and service stations have to sell it at the price that is announced by government, so the adjusted price. But just a caveat to that, there are different zones in which fuel is sold in the country. So, for instance, you will pay more for fuel in Gauteng than you will, for instance, in Bloemfontein because of the transport costs associated with getting the fuel further from Durban to Gauteng. In that situation, you may also find that fuel stations which are very close to each other geographically are also located in different zones, and the petrol they sell may be marginally different in price, but not to the extent of R2.50. We're talking about cents differences between that. So petrol is a regulated fuel, has to be sold at a specific price according to the zone in which the service station is located. Diesel is an unregulated fuel, can be sold for higher or for less than what the wholesale price is that is announced by government.
Yeah, and you've nailed it on the head. I think I was exactly talking about me, Leighton. As you know, I drive a very heavy diesel vehicle, which one day we'll have a discussion about on that. So the problem, I suppose, is before we talk about the levies that we can maybe move around as governments in this country, the problem is they'll tell you that diesel engines are more economical. I suppose the irony is it costs you more to fill them, even though they are more economical. I suppose that's the irony of the situation. So you're talking about the 75 cents reduction. It's going to come to an end at roughly the end of August, I think, if I heard you correctly. If this reduction falls away, where else can government really cut back on? Because we're hearing discussions around the road accident fund. How practical is something like that before I say goodbye to you?
Well, the fuel reduction levy actually ends in August. So when the fuel price is adjusted for August, there will be no relief, according to government, of that R1.50. So whatever increases we have will then be added back to the 75. The 75 cents will be added back to whatever increases or decreases occur for August. Look, I mean, in terms of the levies, Gareth, we've been very clear on the fact that, you know, there needs to be a much deeper interrogation of the numbers that constitute the fuel price. There are many different elements, components of the fuel price. We feel there needs to be a deeper interrogation of all of those components, an audit of all of those figures, and a determination whether they're all still necessary and applicable to the fuel price. We've seen academic reports stating that, for instance, the basic fuel price hasn't been reviewed in a long time, and that there is a difference between the basic fuel price and the import parity price, which is the price we pay for the fuel before it lands, or when it lands in South Africa, before any other costs are added to it. So in our view, there is a very substantial need for a deep review and interrogation of that fuel price. And we think that the sooner that's done, the sooner we can get some answers as to whether there are any gaps in that calculation that can result in savings to deal with these rises that we are seeing. In terms of the levies, the one concern we have with the general fuel levy, which we know there have been many calls for that levy to be scrapped, is that government, in our view, will be loath to then say, well, we'll just do away with the 90 billion rand income that generates annually. So we'll find alternative means to actually get that money. We'll introduce new taxes, or we'll increase existing taxes, so they will get that money through other ways, which will be counterproductive in the bigger scheme of things in terms of reducing cost of living costs for South Africans. So that, in our view, is not a feasible solution. The Road Accident Fund, on the other hand, is something we feel needs private sector intervention through many different organizations, for instance, such as insurance companies. And there is a need for that institution, in our view, to be for its management to be interrogated better as well, with a view to streamlining its operations. I think the big issue for us in terms of the Road Accident Fund is why we have such an over-reliance in South Africa on the RAF, because it compensates victims of crashes. If we're looking at reducing fuel costs in South Africa, and I know this may seem counterintuitive, but one of the things we have to do is look at our road safety record in the country, because that has a direct correlation with the fuel price. So if we can improve our road safety record through better education programs and whatever, that for us is a very important step forward and should be a priority for government. So in terms of the levies, I think, Gareth, that is our point of view on that.
And I appreciate your time, as always, Leighton Beard, being part of our eNCA Focus Day. The cost of transport. It's all part of a cost of living special that we're busy looking at the moment, from food to electricity. Now we're looking at the cost of transport. Leighton Beard from the AA, the spokesperson, joining us this morning. Two big takeaways. We know the fuel levy fight will continue, but two big things from Leighton Beard that stood out for me is guaranteed we are going to have a fuel price increase again in the first week of July. That is guaranteed. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, especially for diesel drivers, is that diesel is unregulated in this country. So the advice there was, take a look and find your cheapest garage, your petrol station that charges the least amount for diesel. Petrol is regulated, diesel is not. So you could be paying a lot more than you should be if you're a diesel driver in South Africa. Tumza, I finally got my answer as to why some garages are charging more for diesel and others. It's simply not regulated. So the point is, if you drive diesel, drive around, if you have the fuel, to find the cheapest fuel.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you remember, I think Maya once mentioned, Gareth, of an app that she, of course, tried to use to just attempt to see which garages did have the cheapest, either diesel or even petrol. The name just skips my mind right now, but I'm sure you remember Maya Fisher-French joining us. Perhaps we can ask her about it a bit later on. But thanks, Gareth. Those conversations will still continue right here on the SA Morning, how you and I are impacted by these increased petrol costs. All right.